Stigmatization around mental health still exists. When it comes to parenting, they always say there is no single playbook. When your child is growing up and they start to struggle, you can often feel like you're completely alone. Talking about your child's mental health or substance use is not typically the first topic brought up when you're around your friends. Since January of 2023, I've been extending the opportunity for parents who feel comfortable talking about their journey to do so on this podcast. No topic is off limits, and not all stories are positive. This series is meant to be honest, transparent, and real for each individual parent's experience with their child. Please note that this special parent series is the parent perspective of their child's crisis. This is merely one perspective of a single story, and it's important to know that names have been changed for the protection of the parents and the children. These episodes may include details surrounding suicide, self-harm, substance abuse, including overdose, hospitalizations, psychotic episodes, and other traumatic experiences, which include parts of the treatment journey. That includes working with consultants, hiring a transport, wilderness therapy, and residential treatment experiences. All that is to say, listener discretion is advised. Welcome to the Parent Series, brought to you by Success is Subjective.
It's time now for the Success is Subjective podcast. Here is your host and therapeutic consultant for young adults only, Joanna Lilly.
Hi, and welcome to the show. Today, my guest is Beth Hillman. When Beth's 15-year-old son went to wilderness therapy, she realized they both needed a reset. Her personal development journey led her to create the coaching program and support she longed for as a parent. She became a double certified life coach, Arbinger's Living with an Outward Mindset seminar facilitator, and threw herself into parent coaching. Beth has also worked as a family program director, Arbinger seminar teacher at a wilderness program, and a parent transitions coach. Beth currently coaches struggling parents privately and in small groups. Let's get to the interview now with Beth on today's edition of Success is Subjective. Well, hi, Beth. Thanks for being a guest on the parent series of the Success is Subjective podcast.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm super excited to hear about your parent perspective with your child, and then kind of weaving through to what it is that you're doing now. So we're just going to jump right in.
Okay.
Give a little bit of backstory on what was going on, again, from the parent perspective, what was going on with your child prior to the idea of you as parents intervening and exploring treatment.
Well, I'd say one of the first things we noticed is just lots and lots and lots of anger, which was different than what he had typically, I guess, acted like. He was a pretty fun-loving kid. He was the fourth brother, so he had a lot of teasing and stuff like that, but still all in most fun. But he just started to become very angry and not around very much. So it was very interesting. I knew something was up, but I didn't know what exactly it was. I don't know how much detail you want here, but so I remember just like something is going on, and him and my husband, his dad, were actually really conflicting, which no one ever conflicts with my husband because he's just kind, and and most of the boys just like loved their dad. And so I thought that was really odd. Man, he was just spiteful and angry and just, I don't even know how, just hated everything and hated everyone and that kind of thing. So one day I thought, I know something's up. I know something's up. And I would ask him, and he would say things like, "You do not want to know. You cannot handle it. There's no way I'm telling you." He just would laugh and walk away. I mean, it just very interesting. So one day, honestly, I was just doing my dishes, and there was a lot of commotion because he has 3 older brothers, and just like sports and it was very chaotic and very busy. And at this point in time, nobody was home except me and this kid. And I remember thinking, how am I ever going to find out what's going on? I don't know what to do. And I remember just thinking, go now. And I'm like, oh, okay. I don't know what said it. It was just like this internal knowing or, gift from the universe. I went upstairs, I knocked on his door, and I said, "Hey, sex, drugs, rock and roll, we love you no matter what." And I said, but if it could just actually be rock and roll, that'd be really great. And it was a joke, but he laughed, and then he opened his door, and then he just bawled. He sobbed on my shoulder. And I said, "Are you ready to tell me?" And he said, "Yeah." And this is interesting because this was the beginning. He told me, I would probably say like a lot. He told me a lot. He told me all the drugs he was taking. He told me about all the kids, how he got it in the hallways. I mean, he was like an open book in this moment, which is very odd. And I just kept saying, I was in a really good moment, just a good space. And I kept saying, "Okay, tell me more. Okay, tell me more." And I said, "That sounds really hard." And I did not know any of this. And it just kind of came to me. And then, ridiculously enough, I thought, well, I solved that. It was such good parenting. And that was when everything hit the fan. Because at that point, he was still hiding. He was still pretending. He was still like had all these. And I think then since he kind of thought, oh, since I've told her, and that's when he disappeared. Like emotionally, mentally, physically, that's when it actually really started to be awful.
And what was just from the parent perspective, kind of what was your fear then at that time? I know you just said like here in this like moment, I was like, great, that problem is solved. And then it went downhill from there, clearly.
Yeah, I think the fear was, oh, wait, there's more? Like that was rock bottom. I mean, now I just laugh hysterically at that idea, but hey, I was naive. So I thought that was rock bottom. I thought, oh my gosh, well, you're just not going to take any of that stuff anymore, right? And he's like, "I don't want to." I think he was genuine, right? And so my fear was then, I mean, that was the beginning of what I thought was the end, right? I got really depressed. I got really controlling, but that didn't work. He refused to be grounded. I lost all connection with him. It was an utter nightmare because he, like I said, he stopped coming home. I mean, he would stop in once in a while. We lost everything. And so I got into this moment of like, well, there's nothing I can do. I've tried everything. That's where I was. I was so ashamed. I was so embarrassed. I didn't tell a soul. I was in utter frozen. I was just completely utter freeze mode for a while there.
Wow. So what ended up happening, right? I know that he went to treatment, but when did we come to that like conclusion that this is the intervention that's necessary? So
what happened is I was in just a complete moment of there's like, I thought all was lost. I was like, well, we're losing it. It's just an odd thing to think of, but I really was there. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know of anything. And my sister-in-law, there was a couple of things that happened. My sister-in-law came over and she just was like, "We will not lose him. He is too important." And she sort of like shook me out of my freeze mode. And I was like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And we knew one person who had taken substances and who had gone to this thing called Wilderness. And we reached out to them, and it was very difficult because I don't know how my sister-in-law found out because we were hiding everything. Because for me, I was just like, well, I must be bad. I must be the bad parent because I couldn't make my kid stop by asking him, right? He wasn't listening to me. So I had so much shame and guilt myself, so much embarrassment. It was stifling. So I convinced my husband and I to reach out to this one person. He was in our neighborhood, a dad. I reached out to him and he said, absolutely. My son and I, and his son had been out of Wilderness for probably a good 10 years. And so they had us over. They were so kind. And it was the only person I felt like wouldn't judge me, because we had all these other neighbors who had all these, fine children who were going to college and all their sports and all this stuff. I mean, the weight of shame I felt was large. I think many parents go through that. And so he was the first person who said, this dad and the son, and the son was like, it changed everything. It was everything to me. And so we were like, oh, and they both were so encouraging. And they're like, did it fix everything? No, but it did change everything for me. It sent me on a different trajectory. And so then my husband said, well, he had this friend who had done a number of destructive behaviors when he was a youth, and now he's a social worker. And so we ended up being able to call him. So these people who had been through it was the only people I would allow to hear what was going on. And that happened for about 6 months. And this wonderful friend said, you can't do this on your own. you can't keep him safe, and it has nothing to do with your parenting. And I remember just thinking, yes, it has everything to do with my parenting. I should be able to handle this. I should be able to do this. And he's like, why would you think? You don't have any experience with this. And I was like, well, that's true. And so this love and this empathy from this other person. And he's like, have you heard of wilderness? And we said, well, we had. And he said, I want you to look in. And he just sent us a couple to look. And that's what happened. We just were able to look at a few. And at the point, we didn't have an EC, but we did have this wonderful person who said, these are the two I would recommend. And it took, I don't even know how to explain how my brain was like, absolutely not. This is not, we should not let him go. Why should somebody else parent my kid? He's going to turn out worse. He's going to learn worse things. These other kids, don't have a heart, and he does. I mean, I just told myself lots of, I think, well, they seemed crazy, but I think they were very, very common for the fear of a parent turning their child over to, a program or an institution. It's very, very scary. And I actually was able to talk to the executive director, which is not very common, but because this friend knew, it just happened to, we just got a little in. And that gentleman was an absolute godsend. He knew every single defensive thought I had, because he knew about wilderness. And he said, I know you're thinking this, and that things are going to change. I know you think that, you're scared to get help because it means you're a bad parent. I mean, he called me out on every fear I had. He did. And he's like, and I said, well, I've got these Tony Robbins tickets, in the summer. I think that, and he just looked at me and he goes, that's not it. And he said, I love Tony Robbins. It's amazing. But that 4-day event it's not, you need something longer. And he was just very direct. And I trusted him because, he knew exactly what he was talking about. And it took a hard convince. I think it is a hard convince to ask parents to not only pay this exorbitant, might I add, amount of money. But at this point, I mean, I'm going to jump a second. I would have paid 10 times that amount for the amount that it changed my son and it helped us. And I just know that these people, aren't running off to Fiji in their 10 homes. That's not what's happening. It just costs a lot to run a program. So I learned a lot of that with, between that point, which was 6-7 years ago, to now. But that's how we got him in. It took everything I had as a parent. It did.
Well, and how was that, knowing that you went to a wilderness program too, and you're talking about all the defenses that you're throwing out initially, like, this is like, I should ... be able to do this differently for my child from that parent perspective. And it's all driven by love. But how is that wilderness experience for you?
Okay. So to be completely honest, it was a little wonky. I loved the wilderness experience. Our letters back and forth were very important to me. I remember that being really wonderful, but I had a sense of, I didn't quite know what was going on. I felt a little left out. I think that's probably the fairest way to put it. I felt a little left out. I did get, of course, we heard from his therapist, and there was some parent helps. There was a parent support group. There was a book, which was moderately helpful. But this is just my experience, I wanted more. And I do believe nowadays parents are getting a lot more. But back then I felt a little left out, a little neglected. And I had those sneaky thoughts like, my son is learning more than me. He's going to know more than me. He's going to have tools. He's going to have experiences that I'm not having. And I didn't know, I had worries and concerns about knowing how to meet him and knowing how to parent him from this point, because I thought, and I had, the therapist had said, and I didn't have my own therapist, which I probably should have, but I didn't know then. How am I going to be better for him? How am I going to show up different for him? Because I know that I was making lots of mistakes. I did know that I had some kind of insight, but I didn't know exactly what they were. So I went to the parent seminar, which they did have. And that was the first moment of, oh my gosh, I have so much work to do. I kind of had this idea that maybe it had something to do with me, but they gave me permission that if I could admit that I was part of the problem, then I could absolutely be part of the solution. That was a huge epiphany for me. And it gave me permission to admit, oh, I probably am doing some things that aren't helpful. And so I was able to give myself that permission, or they gave me permission. And then I was able to start seeking, what does that look like? What is my own work? What can I possibly do to help this kid? Yeah.
Okay. So Beth, I know the work that you're doing now because we've talked about it, but if somebody's listening to this and they don't know your story, I think it's beneficial for you to kind of now explain the marrying of your personal experience with professionally where you are today.
Yeah. So at that moment, I go to the parent seminar, I learned some things, and then I left completely wanting. I was just like, why are parents getting left behind? That's how I felt. And I was just like, why are there not more supports for parents? Why aren't there more helps? Why aren't more people realizing, I guess this is just my kind of somewhat closed perception at the time, is this is a family systems issue. Now I know those terms. Then I was just like, why are we sending our kids away, but not giving the parents some more tools? And so I thought, it was so excruciating, to be completely honest. And I thought, I don't want anyone else, if I can help it, to go through these feelings without support. And so I thought, what can I do? And by the way, my kiddo, he came out of wilderness, and we made a decision for him to come home. We moved, which was different and unique, but it's what we could do as a family. And I remember thinking, I have to be better as a parent. My child deserves a more knowledgeable and experienced parent. So I thought, well, I don't have 8 years to become a psychologist, darn it, but I do have some time to go to life coach school. So I looked at a bunch. I had friends sending me things, and that same friend who had destructive behavior, but was a social worker, said, listen to this podcast. And I started listening to a podcast called The Life Coach School. Some people know about it, but it was at the point everything to me. And I started to work on me. That is a very specific decision, because when my son got out, I kept trying to control his behavior, and that was not working. And we were running into problems, butting heads again. I was showing up as my controlling, angry, anxiety self still. And I just was like, this is not working. I actually went into quite a big depression for about 6 to 8 weeks, very intense. And I came out basically just that I can do this differently, that there is hope for us, thanks to my brother and some other lovely friends and people. And so I took myself to life coach school, knowing that this was more about me now, and that I would not throw this in my child's face, the stuff I was learning, but I would internalize it. And I did. I just started at my very core, and I started to work through my anger issues. I started to work through my lack of emotional maturity. And I started to just understand things that I would say the lame person doesn't know about mindfulness, about emotional, how we can safely and healthily deal with emotions. I just started to learn it all. And 6 months later, it didn't just happen like that, but through trial and error, I was able to present to my son the beginnings of a completely different mom. I was able to hold space, and I know it was in me. It was still me. I just had to tap into that even while my son was still having destructive behaviors. And that's, I guess, why I start to become a parent coach, because I thought, man, if I can do it, anyone can do it, because I'm just a person. And it threw everything into a new trajectory. And not only with my son, of course, but with me. And I was able to figure out how to do it differently. And now it's like my life's work. So that's how I got into parent coaching, was my definite own inabilities. And I couldn't hold boundaries for the life of me. It was, and now I can, and I just had to figure out how to do it. So,
well, now you help others do it all the time.
And now I help others. And it's so great because I've been there. I know a lot of times what that survival brain says, all the defenses, I'm really familiar with all those thoughts. And so I really relate. I can really, really relate to the fear of holding boundaries. And of course, everything else that's associated with being the parent that you want to be.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask this question because I ask all of my guests, but I'm going to put a little twist on it, which I feel like you will appreciate based on a lot of the focus that you've shared through the parent perspective. So knowing that now that you've got the certification, you're saying this is my life's work. I'm going to ask the question, do you see yourself as successful knowing that you have transitioned into a different career, you've shifted parenting styles? But a part of what I'm getting at in asking this question is, do you see yourself as successful as a parent?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that one. I think one of my greatest successes is that I'm willing to let who now is a young adult, be who he wants to be. I am willing to let go of so many thoughts and ideas and expectations that I did not even know existed. I mean, they're not silly, but like expectations like, I just want you to be a decent human being. And because he was taking substances, that meant he wasn't in my previous self. I'm like, wait a minute. There are lots of decent people who are addicted to substances. So understanding that and letting those judgments go and creating empathy with boundaries has been my greatest work. And I still work on it. I think it's one of those things that I feel like I'm always going to work at, or I'm always going to have something to kind of go through. But I think that's one of my greatest successes is understanding that behavior is from an underlying need, I guess. And just knowing that and being able to act on that knowledge versus acting on maybe my first reaction might be like judgment and pain and intolerance and all that, to then very quickly, in many cases now, be able to shift to, no, wait a second, that makes sense. And then being empathetic toward that and supportive and have boundaries. That, I believe, truly has been my greatest success, is being able to do that quicker and quicker. And so hopefully that answers that question. And yes, I see myself as successive too, as in switching careers. That is a lovely side effect of honestly me just living my passion and being able to share my pain and create a purpose from that has been everything to me, and being able to help more and more people.
Well, thank you for that. So final question, and I should also preface too, for anybody that's listening to this, we'll actually make sure we have Beth's website and contact information in the show notes, because if you are a parent listening and you don't have a parent coach, I am one of those consultants that's always pushing for this type of resource, because I'm not a parent. So as empathetic as I can be to the clients that I'm working with, I am not going to be the best person to coach them through how to support their child, at least in the like lived experience that a parent coach might have, especially a parent coach that is a parent themselves. So I say all that, contact information in the show notes. Last question. If you could give any parting advice, maybe something that you haven't already infused through your own experience and sharing this story, but if there's anything that you can impart right now, and I'm not going to be specific about it, just a parent that is dealing with a child in the home that they are struggling with, so it's super broad, what imparting advice would you give to that parent right now?
Okay. That is such a big question. I would say this is sort of my mantra, right? Is the change begins with us. We can try to control our children, and we can be so manipulative as parents. And it does come from love. You're very right about that. And we try so hard to get them to change or to shift, to fix their behavior, to choose something else. We try so hard. And that's not the answer. That has some of the answer, right? Because if we hadn't have stepped in and sent our kid out of wilderness, clearly we would not be where we are. But I think, and will always say, the change begins with us. In order to be able to be with your child while they're angry, I have to be okay with my own anger. And the only way that I'm going to be able to do that is if I do my own work. And I know we sort of say that, as professionals, sort of flippantly, do your own work. But what I mean is increase your awareness of yourself. Where do you struggle? Where are your dysfunctional patterns? Where do you lose control? And be able and willing to see that. I know that's a long journey. It's taken me a very long time to hit that, but be willing to be wrong and be willing to be more aware and start. And I know that you're trying to parent at the same time. You can't take a break from that. I get that. but be willing to do your own work. Get yourself a parent coach or a therapist or whatever that support looks like for you in order to start doing your own work, because you cannot show up for the parent that you want to be if you're not working through your own stuff. That's what I would say.
Mic drop, right?
Mic drop. Yeah, exactly. And like it's how it works. And I'm just going to tell you, like, when I started to do my own work, when I was able to recognize like, oh, I could actually do this a completely different way. And I noticed my son getting defensive and blaming and all this, like the patterns, but I didn't fall into the pattern. It was like the gold at the end of the rainbow. I cannot tell you how powerful that was to change my pattern. And then my son thinking I was abducted by aliens because I was not doing the same pattern, but it was just like, oh my gosh, I can do this differently and then influence my child for the better. It's a brand new day.
Yep. That's the gold right there. That's the gold.
It is the gold.
Well, Beth, thank you again for being a guest on the podcast. Again, for anybody listening, all contact information is in the show notes. Definitely reach out to Beth. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
That's it for this week's Success is Subjective episode. We want to thank our guests for joining Joanna on the show this week and for being willing to share your journey. This podcast would not exist if it weren't for people such as yourself. Stay tuned for our next episode, where you can bet it'll be another amazing human sharing their personal story with the world. Make sure you check out the show notes, where you will find contact information, website details, and all social media for our guest. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can email joanna@lilyconsulting.com. Be sure to check out the lilyconsulting.com website for additional resources outside of podcasting. Now, if you're listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review. You can also download to listen to the Success is Subjective podcast on other popular podcast apps, such as Audible, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Thanks again for listening in, and remember, there is no single path through life. Success is what you make it.
Do you have a teenager or young adult who seems to have lost their way? Maybe they need help navigating adolescence, adulthood, and decisions surrounding higher education. Or maybe they have become withdrawn, their grades are slipping, or they are flat out living a reckless lifestyle, and you're concerned about their health and well-being. If this describes what your teen or young adult is facing, a therapeutic consultant may be able to help. Mental health, addiction recovery, and higher education can all be equally expensive. While information is everywhere, how do you know what option is the best one for your family? Some parents have the time to research and navigate this on their own. Some don't. If the latter applies to you, enter therapeutic consultants. Therapeutic consultants, like Joanna, listen to your family's specific needs and advocate on behalf of your loved one. TCs will research therapeutic resources, recommend treatment programs, and assist during adulthood transitions. Not being affiliated with any program, their support is completely objective and catered toward the best interest of each unique family. To find a qualified therapeutic consultant to work with, check out TCA, also known as the Therapeutic Consulting Association. Their website is therapeuticconsulting.org, all one word. Again, that's therapeuticconsulting.org. Then click the Find a Pro tab up at the top.